Hey, I'm Brian. Welcome back to the Big List of Projects. So we are going to be doing a one-day build that will really only take one day, and I'm only going to be using things that I already have. And the subject for this build is going to be Yuru's Dragon Amulet of the Left and Right from Daemons of the Shadow Realm. And the easiest way to do that would just be to 3D print it. I already found some models, and they're pretty cheap and pretty good, but that is way too easy. And if you look at the picture, it seems like it might be made out of jade, and I've always wanted to try carving jade. And if you can tell, we're in my bathroom, and I think I know just where I can find some. Last I checked, I think there is some right here. Don't tell my wife. So to get the design right, I took that screen grab from the anime and brought it into Procreate, where I could isolate just the amulet and overlay it over the piece of jade that I have so I can figure out what fits best and what size to make everything. Then I could use my 3D printer to print it out in slightly more than 2 dimensions to use as a template. I actually figured out that I can make the template slightly bigger if I tilt it just like this to maximize the size of the finished amulet. Holding that in place, I can mark the outline with some spray paint. For other carvings, a paper printed outline would have worked just fine, but the spray paint is going to be better for reasons you will understand in just a minute. So this is going to be my carving station for the day, and most of it is going to be done with this rotary tool with my handpiece here. And jade is actually very hard, so you really want diamond encrusted bits for it. So I have a selection of those that I'm going to be using here. You may have noticed the big acetone bottle as well as the bucket, and that's because when you carve jade, it turns into a really fine dust that you really don't want to be breathing in. So a lot of jade is carved underneath flowing water. Fortunately, I just got this device for a completely different set of projects that will be on the channel later, and let me know if you recognize what it may be for. But luckily, it came with this water pump setup that I have in a bucket here in the back, and this hose, which conveniently is magnetic. So I can just take this off, put it on my acetone bottle, and then I can have a steady stream of water to carve under. But don't worry, I will be wearing a respirator as well. And with that, I can turn on the flow of water, start up the rotary tool, and get to carving with what has got to be the worst camera position of all time. Let's see how long it takes me to figure that out. Yeah, that's not going to work. Okay, that angle is much better. Round 2. Rotary tool? Check. Water? Check. And we carve. So I'm starting out with a diamond cutoff wheel and just using it to rough out the general shape of the 2 dragons, taking off large sections around the perimeter, getting as close as I can to the border of the paint without going over. This is actually a really fun step to start with since the amulet starts to get more and more refined as the dragons start to take shape. Usually the finished product of a project is not very easily seen at the beginning, and it's somewhere around 75% of the way through before it really starts to resemble the end product. But this one started to appear relatively quickly just from this rough shaping. And that was pretty cool to see. And honestly, it may sound a little lame, but I'm already feeling like I'm connecting with the art form. Jade carving has been happening throughout history in different civilizations for thousands of years. The amount of detail that can be captured and the rich shades of greens and whites that show through are unparalleled through these carvings. And I am super stoked to be able to join in that practice, even in just this small way. Even more so because I get to use these really nice tools to speed up the process. I really don't think that I have the patience or the skills to do this manually, and I have an incredible amount of respect for those that did and still do to this day. But even so, I'm finding it pretty slow going, messy, and difficult to control. But I can feel myself getting better at it as I continue to carve. And after a little bit of time and effort, here is the general shape roughed in. For the central hole, I can switch to some diamond encrusted drill bits to first give me a couple of pilot holes to work with. I can then use the cutoff wheel again to connect the holes and hollow out that center line. Here I'm using the edge of the blade to slowly grind away and open up this channel enough to get some other bits in. It's important not to put too much pressure on the side of the blade when doing this, since they can really easily shatter and send shrapnel in every direction at very high speeds.
PSA, wear eye protection.
I can then go back to the template with some Sharpie just to redefine the parts that I still need to sneak up on, both on the outside and also in the center hole. And with this central channel providing access, I can switch over to some smaller bits to start working away at the rest of the shapes outlined in the black. There's still a little bit of refining to be done, but I'm happy enough to move on to the main carving design. I simply draw that on by eye using a thinner Sharpie this time. I could have printed out a stencil with the lines all mapped out for the most accuracy and precision, but I really wanted to do this part manually. I think it lends more of a personal touch to the carving, but I don't know. Let me know what you would have done. Then I can move on to my thinnest and pointiest bits to start tracing those lines as steadily as I can. And this is not easy. The material is very hard and it feels like it is fighting me every time I want to change direction. And there are a lot of different flowing lines in this design, which is presenting quite a challenge. A lot of the thicker lines can be carved with this cone-shaped bit, which leaves a nice V groove as it carves, but some of the lines are a lot more tight together and a lot more delicate. And for that, I swap over to this really long and thin pointed bit. I would have used bits like this for more of the carving to take things a little bit slower and to give me a little more control, but I only have a couple of these and they actually wear down pretty quickly. The material is hard enough to shave down the sharp points of these bits after just a couple minutes of carving. But the hardness of jade is one of the reasons why it has been such a good candidate for traditional art. Did you know that there are actually two different minerals that are classified as jade? They're called nephrite and jadeite, and both of them come in a variety of green shades as well as non-green colors such as white, lavender, yellows, and even black. Nephrite is often easier to carve due to it being slightly less hard and slightly less tough. Jadeite tends to be a little more expensive, but both have traditionally been carved just like this. You may be wondering if I will need to replicate this carving on the backside as well, and the answer is no. For one, I think I carved more than halfway deep for parts of this design, meaning that there's a risk of cutting all the way through if I did the same on the reverse side. But fortunately, there is actually a brief glimpse of the back of the amulet in the show, and it appears to be totally flat, so I don't even need to. And things are actually going really well as I near the end of this design. I can further refine and round the edges by rotating and twisting the piece along my strip sander. This is where it actually starts to feel like a carving as the edges start to smooth out, instead of just a slab of rock. Feels really nice in the hand. Now, let me address the jade carved elephant in the room, the burning question that has been on everyone's mind. Am I actually carving jade, like real, authentic jade? Apparently, there are a ton of fake products sold online as jade despite having entirely different compositions. Sometimes being a different stone entirely, sometimes glass. Some jade is deemed inferior in quality and is treated with resin and different additives to simulate a higher quality stone. And high quality jade is typically thought to be fairly expensive, not normally something that you can just find in a bathroom cabinet. And I'll be honest, I don't know, but there are some tests that you can conduct to be relatively confident that the jade you're working on is authentic. Now, spoiler alert, this is actually the second iteration of this amulet that I carved out of quote-unquote jade. And as you can see, the first was a much darker specimen. That's why I wanted to practice on this one before I moved on to the one that looks more accurate. So let's test them. For one, jade is highly thermally conductive. That means that it wicks away heat really well. It's one of the reasons that it's used in cosmetic products. To test jade, you can put it against your skin and it should feel cool to the touch for a really long time. And after it's removed, it should cool down again fairly quickly. I held my own jade to my cheek for exactly 2 minutes and it remained cold the entire time, which feels like a pretty good sign. 2 minutes, both still kind of cold. Another test is related to hardness. Jade is very tough and resistant to breaking, but on the Mohs hardness scale, it's only around a 6 or a 7 depending on the variety. That means that it should not be scratched by glass or steel, so I'm using a bit of steel just to try to scratch both samples. It was pretty easy to see when the scratches appeared on the darker piece and they couldn't be rubbed away, which suggests that it actually did scratch the jade. Now on the lighter sample, I'm doing the same force with the same steel, and I'm not leaving any scratches. I'm trying to use an even amount of pressure on both pieces, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job of that. But I think the true test comes when I hold it up to the light. So you can see in the glare here that there are no scratches in that section. And when I pick up the darker piece, you can see that there are scratches in the glare. Now the final test I'm going to be doing is involving this UV light. So authentic jade should not have any fluorescence under UV light. But if the jade has been treated with resin and different polymers, those should fluoresce. And I do think I see some fluorescence in the grooves that I've carved in. Not in the rest of the jade, but I do think I see glowing in the grooves. But you let me know what you think. So you tell me, is the darker one nephrite and the lighter one jadeite? I mean, technically, nephrite does have a lower rating on the Mohs hardness scale and theoretically could be scratched by steel. But at the same time, I think I saw some fluorescence under the UV light, so who's to say? Honestly, are either of them authentic jade? Probably not. They were both relatively inexpensive. But honestly, I don't care. This project was never about the authenticity or the value of the materials. It was much more about the carving process, which, by the way, we are not done with. I retrieved one of the offcuts from the first step of the process, and then I drilled a hole in it using the same diamond encrusted drill bits. Then I could widen that hole with the cone-shaped bit to make it easier to pass string through, because this is going to be the bead that is at the top of the necklace. After that, all that was left to do was further refine the shape of the bead using my strip sander. I chose to use the strip sander here instead of the cutoff wheels because things were getting a little too close to my fingers to feel safe, and the sander gives me a decent amount of control. Now you see that I am using water here to cool it down because sanding can actually generate a lot of heat, and I want to keep the stone from getting too much heat. With just a little more refining, this is what we are left with, a nice looking bead that is just as thick as I can make it with the thickness of the offcut I was working with. The actual bead is maybe a little thicker, but I think this sells the idea pretty well. And finally, all we need is the string to literally tie it all together. Okay, so here are my two options for the string. We have jute twine, which is nice, and probably the most authentic to what Yuru would have had access to in his village, but it is very fibrous and a little sloppy. So the other option is this synthetic string here, which also looks nice and is a lot neater. So I would probably go with this one, but honestly, why don't we just do one of each? There's one, not bad. Made it. That is the second one. And here are the finished products side by side and zoomed in to get as much detail captured as I possibly can in these shots. You can see that they both look really good, but the lighter version did take detail a lot better. And I think that's because it was a little more difficult to carve. Those details were less likely to be carved away accidentally. You can actually see on the darker version that I carved too deeply into the center hole because it was so much easier to carve. But regardless, I love them both, and I really enjoyed the carving process. But let me know what you think. Either way, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. We can go ahead and check off jade carving from the big list of projects. And you can see that fired clay is also on there a little further down, and we will be getting to that very soon. I just got to figure out where I'm going to do it. Eagle-eyed viewers might also spot Tattoo Machine has been checked off, but Tattoo has not. And if that interests you at all, subscribe to the channel because we will be getting to that eventually. Special thank you to Jess Carpenter and Thomas Computes, as always, for being my top supporting members on the channel. And a shout out goes to Malcy the Marionette for being my newest supporting channel member. Welcome to the Blob Squad. But that is all I have for you today, so I will see you in the next project. Peace. Heck yeah, look at you. Only the true fans have what it takes to make it to the end, and you did that. Appreciate it. If you like that video and you like Zelda builds, you might like my life-size builds of the Zora Fishbone guitar and the Zora Crab bass. I got both of those on the playlist and another video on the left that I think you might like too. Check it out and click the circle in the center to subscribe. Love you. Blop.